A week prior to her wedding, Katya stopped by the restaurant to finalize the menu and guest seating arrangements. At the entrance, a waitress quickly intercepted her. "Hide behind the screen in the far corner. There's no time to explain, just trust me." Katya obeyed, and within 5 minutes, everything became clear. But before we continue, please tell me what country you're from and your age. Enjoy the story. Katya had always believed that happiness favored quiet discretion, not loud declarations, not ostentatious displays, and certainly not empty promises. She envisioned a future like in the movies, but with a calm certainty. Waking up beside a loved one in the morning without any apprehension about the day ahead. She was 34 years old, an economist working for a small yet robust company. She lived in her own 2-bedroom apartment, purchased with a mortgage before she even met Alexei, and had long grown accustomed to being in control of her life. It wasn't because she was a woman of iron will, but simply because it brought her peace of mind. Everything was documented, verified, and in its proper place. Alexei entered her life subtly, without fanfare. He was part of a group of partners visiting her office for a corporate event. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with a reserved smile and an attentive gaze. Upon meeting him, Katya thought, finally, a mature man. He didn't try to impress her, boast about his expensive cars or his numerous acquaintances, nor did he speak with aggression. He simply asked where he could get a decent cup of coffee, and joked that if he heard the word synergy one more time, he'd retreat to a monastery. Katya laughed, remarking, "It's been so long since I've felt this at ease." This was followed by dates, strolls through the park, tea in a cozy little cafe, and movie outings away from the crowds. Alexei had a knack for being present without being overbearing. He'd call to ask about her day. He'd arrive with apples and cheese, having noticed her fondness for the variety with nuts. One evening, when Katya stayed late at work and stepped out into the rain without an umbrella, he pulled up, handed her an umbrella, and said, "You are more important to me than any task." Simple words, yet delivered with a tone that made them utterly believable. Katya believed him. She wanted to believe him. She wasn't a naive girl, but deep down, a part of her still yearned for a normal family life. Not for showy gold rings or a wedding with 100 guests, but for a home where she was truly awaited. Alexei proposed without any fireworks. They were sitting in her kitchen, and he was helping her chop salad. At one point, he paused, wiped his hands with a towel, and said, "Katya, I don't want to live like a guest anymore. I want to be your person. Will you marry me?" She didn't answer immediately. She felt a warmth spreading through her, a quiet joy. She accepted, her voice soft but firm. They decided to have their wedding reception at a restaurant. Initially, Katya had considered a simple civil ceremony followed by a dinner with their closest family and friends, and then a 2-week getaway. However, Alexei had a mother, aunts, and other relatives who would be offended. Alexei himself had argued, "Katya, this is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Let's make it beautiful. You deserve it." And so, despite her reservations, Katya agreed to a compromise. A reputable restaurant, not a palace, and a respectable number of guests. Not thousands. Deep down, she hoped there wouldn't be too much fuss. A week before the wedding, it was time to confirm the menu and guest seating. Katya compiled the guest list, printed it out, placed it in a folder along with the contract and prepayment, and headed to the restaurant alone. Alexei couldn't make it that day. He had a meeting followed by another engagement. "You'll manage," he'd said. "Everything's under control." Katya smiled. Yes, she would manage. The restaurant was located outside the city, a cozy, unpretentious, yet dignified establishment with wooden paneling, soft lighting, and neatly arranged tables. Katya arrived a little early to discuss everything at a leisurely pace. Outside, the air was cool, carrying the scent of damp leaves. She adjusted her scarf and stepped inside. At the entrance, a young waitress in uniform with her hair neatly pulled back and a sharp gaze stopped her. Before Katya could even ask for the manager, the waitress stepped closer and quietly said, "Are you Katya?" Alexei's fiancé. Katya was surprised. Yes, what's wrong? The waitress glanced around as if afraid of being overheard. Please come with me. Quickly, hide behind the screen in the far corner. Katya was taken aback. The girl's voice wasn't hysterical or dramatic, but rather composed and anxious, like someone who understood the gravity of the situation but was holding herself together. Miss, what is going on? Katya attempted a smile, but it felt strained. There's no time to explain, the waitress whispered. Just trust me for 5 minutes. If I'm mistaken, you can come out and forget this. But if I'm right, you need to hear it yourself. Katya felt a surge of annoyance. She was an adult. No one should be dragging her behind a screen. Yet something about the request felt strangely earnest, profoundly human. The girl wasn't asking for money, nor was she leading her into an office. She simply wanted Katya to hide for a moment and listen. Katya nodded, not out of fear, but because she suddenly remembered her own principle. If something seems odd, it's best to pause and observe. The waitress swiftly guided her through the dining area to a decorative screen in a secluded corner where folded chairs and a small serving table were kept. They were almost completely out of sight. Sit here and be quiet, the waitress instructed softly. I'll be nearby if anything comes up. She then disappeared back among the tables. Katya sat behind the screen, feeling rather foolish. What am I even doing? I'm supposed to be meeting the manager. She was about to stand up when she heard a familiar voice. Alexei. He entered the room with someone. Beside him walked a well-groomed, confident woman in a light-colored coat, wearing heels and carrying a bag that looked expensive. She carried herself as if she owned the place. Katya recognized her from photographs. Irina. Alexei had mentioned her in passing, as if she were merely a family acquaintance. She sometimes helps my mother with her errands, he'd said. Don't pay much attention. She's a complicated person. Katya hadn't thought much of it. Helping was helping. Alexei and Irina stopped near the center of the room, not far from the entrance. Katya couldn't see them fully from behind the screen, but she could hear them perfectly. They spoke with confidence, not in hushed tones, as if accustomed to not being overheard. Are you sure she's alone today? Irina asked. I don't like that you let her go without supervision. She always handles these things by herself, Alexei replied calmly. It's safer for her that way, you see. She believes that if she controls everything, then life will be manageable. It's a good thing. I don't like the word believes, Irina chuckled. She's naive, of course, but not unintelligent. Not unintelligent, Alexei agreed. That's why we need to be careful. Everything is proceeding according to plan. Katya felt her fingers grow cold. Plan. She sat perfectly still, as if afraid her breathing would give her away. Irina leaned closer to him. Have you spoken with the notary? Not directly, Alexei responded. Through an intermediary. Everything will be arranged as required. After the wedding, she'll sign it herself if we guide her correctly. The key is not to pressure her, you understand? What if she starts asking questions? She only asks questions where she deems it necessary, Alexei said, then let out a quiet laugh. In her family, she desires quiet happiness. People like that usually think that if they remain silent, the conflict will disappear. But the conflict doesn't disappear, Ira. It just moves to another street. Katya clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into her skin. She wanted to jump out and demand, "What are you talking about?" But she couldn't. Not because she was weak, but because her mind suddenly kicked into overdrive, like a person's does in a moment of danger. First listen, then act. Listen, Irina said. I want to be sure. Are you absolutely certain about handling her apartment situation? It's not her apartment, Alexei replied calmly. She thinks it is. But after the marriage, things will change. And what if she resists? There are options. What kind of options? Legal ones, he stated tersely, and psychological ones. She dislikes scandals. We'll pressure her through her family, through shame, through pity. You know how to play the pity card, Ira." Irina let out a dry laugh. "I know how to play anything when necessary. And your mother?" "Mom is our engine," Alexei replied. "She doesn't care who she manipulates, as long as it's convenient. The main thing is that the money goes in the right direction." Katya felt a wave of nausea rise within her, not at the mention of money, but at the calm tone of his voice. It was as if he were discussing renovations or furniture purchases, not a person entrusting him with her life. "Ira," Alexei continued, "we're doing everything so that she herself believes this is family, that it's right, that she should. She likes being right. People like that are easy to manage." Irina paused, then said, "Aren't you afraid she'll find out something before the wedding?" "Find out what?" Alexei seemed surprised. "That you're not just an acquaintance." Katya held her breath. She suddenly knew that something life-altering was about to be revealed, though she didn't know what it was yet. Irina spoke calmly, as if discussing the weather. "I'm still legally your wife, Lyosha. We never finalized the divorce, remember?" For a moment, Katya felt as if she'd stopped hearing. The world became dense, like cotton, legally married. She felt her heart pound in her throat. Alexei didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "I remember, and it's even better this way for now. It's more advantageous. Later, we'll do it properly." "Later?" Irina winced. "And what if your Katya accidentally discovers she's marrying someone who is technically already married?" "She won't find out," Alexei cut her off. "She doesn't pry into other people's affairs. She trusts. And trust is a gift that people give freely when they are stroked the right way." Katya sat behind the screen, staring into space. One thought hammered in her mind like a bird against glass. He wasn't free. He had lied. He had been planning this. Irina continued, "There's something else I've been thinking about. Be careful with the apartment. She paid the mortgage herself before the marriage. There could be nuances." "Nuances can be resolved," Alexei replied calmly. "She has savings. She has insurance. She's used to handling everything herself. We'll spin it around, say, 'Katya, but we're family. Why are you acting like a stranger?'" And that's it. Katya felt she could no longer remain seated. She was trembling, but she forced herself to stay still for another minute, wanting to hear more. At that moment, a strange thought occurred to her. Before, she wouldn't have believed it. She would have said, "It can't be." But now, she didn't need to believe. She heard. Irina said, "I want you to remember, if anything goes wrong, I'll be the first to say I knew nothing. I don't need problems. I need results." "There will be results," Alexei replied. "It wasn't for nothing that I dragged this out. I need a clean scheme. And I need someone who will bring it all themselves. Katya will bring it. She believes love is about giving. She will keep giving until she has nothing left." Katya closed her eyes. She suddenly remembered him saying once, "You are more important to me than any task," and how easily she had believed it then. Now it felt as if she had been doused with cold water. The waitress reappeared as quietly as a shadow, leaned down and whispered, "Have you heard enough?" Katya nodded slowly. It was difficult for her to speak. "I need to leave," she breathed out. "Use the service exit," the waitress said softly. "There's a door behind the kitchen. I'll open it. They won't see you." Katya didn't ask why she was being helped. She would ask later. Right now, the only important thing is to leave while my legs still hold me. She stood up. Her legs felt like jelly, but her steps were steady. The waitress led her along the wall towards the kitchen. Katya could smell the food, hear the clinking of dishes, but it all felt distant. The waitress opened the door slightly, gesturing with her hand. Quickly. Katya stepped out into the yard where trash cans and wooden pallets stood, and only there, in the cool air, could she take a full breath. She reached her car and got behind the wheel. Her hands trembled so much that she couldn't get the key into the ignition right away. She closed the door, rested her forehead against the steering wheel, and sat there until the trembling subsided. She didn't feel like crying. It was no time for tears. She felt not just deceived as a woman, but as a person. Yet at the same time, a clarity arose within her. It's good that I heard. It's good that I didn't come in earlier. It's good that fate gave me these 5 minutes. She started the car and drove home. Everything was as usual at home. The silence, a neatly folded blanket on the sofa, a cup on the drying rack. Alexei was expected to return late. Katya took off her coat, went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, but didn't make tea. She opened the folder with her apartment documents, took out the title deed, the mortgage agreement, bank statements, laid them on the table, then opened her laptop and logged into her online banking, checking her accounts. Everything was in order. Then she did what she always did in difficult situations. She made a plan. Facts first, then actions. She called her friend Sveta, who was a real estate lawyer. "Sveta, I need a consultation, urgently, today." Sveta heard the urgency in her voice and said, "Come over." Katya drove to Sveta's, taking her documents with her. On the way, she still found it hard to fully believe, even though she had heard it with her own ears, but Sveta quickly brought her back to reality. "Katya, if he is indeed formally married, that's grounds to cancel the registration and file a declaration with the Civil Registry Office. If you haven't registered yet, it's easier to stop it. And if he intended to have you sign something, that's a whole other issue. The most important thing is not to make a scene and not to give him time to regroup." "I don't want a scene," Katya said. "I want to get out of this cleanly and calmly." Sveta nodded. "Then we'll handle this like adults." They drafted a list of steps. Katya was to verify Alexei's marital status. Was he truly married? Inform the Civil Registry Office and the restaurant to minimize financial losses, or at least recover a portion. Protect her assets, accounts, cards, and access points. Stop discussing plans with him. Refrain from showing emotion. Gather evidence without hysterics. Katya returned home late. Alexei was already there, sitting on the sofa watching the news. He stood up and smiled. "So, did you discuss everything? The menu, the seating?" Katya looked at him, and for the first time since they met, saw that his smile wasn't warm. It was convenient, like a suit worn for an occasion. "Yes," Katya said evenly, "almost everything is perfect." Alexei walked over and tried to embrace her. Katya allowed it, not pushing him away, but not embracing him back either. He didn't notice, or pretended not to. "You seem a bit tired," he said. "It was a long day." "Nothing." He kissed her on the forehead. "We'll rest soon. Honeymoon. The sea." Katya nodded and thought, "The sea will be without you." She didn't sleep that night, not because she was anxious, but rather a cold clarity settled within her. She rechecked all her passwords, changed access to her banking applications, disabled auto-saving of cards on marketplaces, made copies of documents, and hid them in a secure place. In the morning, she made an appointment through the State Services portal at the Civil Registry Office, not for the wedding, but to clarify his status and file a declaration of impediment to registration, if confirmed. For 2 days, she lived as if in two worlds. Externally, everything was the same: work, conversations. How were things progressing with the restaurant? Internally, she was preparing to escape a well-laid trap. On the 3rd day, Katya received what she needed for confirmation. Through an acquaintance, Sveta helped her verify some data, and then Katya found out directly. Alexei was indeed still married. The divorce had not been finalized. Papers might have been filed, but the decree hadn't taken effect or had never been completed. Formally, he was married. Katya sat in her car in the parking lot looking at her phone screen. There were no hysterics. There was a feeling as if a stone had fallen onto her shoulders. But with it came a sense of relief. It was no longer a suspicion. It was a fact. She drove to the Civil Registry Office and filed a declaration stating that registration was impossible due to the groom's existing marriage. The employee was initially surprised, then became serious and said, "Thank you for coming in advance. Unfortunately, this does happen. We will investigate everything." Katya walked outside and for the first time in a week took a deep breath of relief. Next was the restaurant. She understood she would lose some money, but money could be recovered. Life couldn't. She drove to the restaurant the same day. The manager greeted her cordially until he realized Katya wasn't there to discuss the menu. "I must cancel the event," Katya said. The manager gasped. "In just a week?" Katya calmly showed him the documents from the civil registry office, a copy of her declaration. "I have a valid reason. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm requesting a refund according to the contract." The manager sighed but didn't argue. A contract is a contract. There were losses, but they weren't catastrophic. As Katya was leaving, she saw the same waitress. The girl was standing by the counter, her gaze cautious, as if expecting Katya to ask, "Why did you interfere?" Katya approached and quietly said, "Thank you." The waitress blinked. You believed me?" "I didn't believe," Katya replied. "I heard." The girl lowered her eyes and exhaled. "I didn't mean to. They came here often and I heard your name when you were discussing the wedding. And then I overheard them again, how they spoke about you. I couldn't stay silent." Katya nodded. "You did the right thing, and you may have saved me from great misfortune." The waitress quietly asked, He didn't do anything to you?" "No, and he won't get the chance." Katya left, feeling a strange gratitude towards someone she had known for only 5 minutes, but who had proven more honest than the man she was about to call her husband. The final part remained. Alexei. He didn't know anything yet, and Katya understood that when he found out, it would be unpleasant. Not because his heart would be broken, but because his scheme would be ruined, and people like him became dangerous at such moments. Not necessarily physically, but with words, pressure, threats. Katya decided the conversation should be brief and in a safe place. She asked Sveta to come to her apartment that evening just to be present, and also warned her cousin, who lived nearby. "If I call, come quickly." Not because she expected a fight, but because she wanted support nearby. In the evening, Alexei returned in a good mood, smiling, talking about work, about plane tickets. Katya listened, thinking how easily he spoke, how easily he lived a lie. And when he finally asked, "Well, is everything ready? Just a few more days?" "Yes," Katya said calmly. "The wedding is off." Alexei froze. For a second, he looked at her as if he hadn't understood her words. "What do you mean?" "Exactly what I said. I've canceled everything." He let out a short, nervous laugh. "Katya, what are you doing? It's a joke. This isn't the time." "I'm not joking." His face changed. The smile vanished. His eyes turned cold. "Why?" Katya looked him directly in the eye. "Because you're married." The silence in the room became palpable. Alexei opened his mouth as if to object, but couldn't find words immediately. You don't understand," he finally said. "It's a formality. It's almost settled. I told you." "You didn't tell me," Katya interrupted. "You lied, and you planned to use me. I heard." "I heard." Alexei narrowed his eyes. "Heard where?" Katya didn't answer, not out of fear, but because she didn't want to discuss the details. She didn't need to justify herself. She wasn't the accused. "I'm leaving," Katya said. "Or rather, you are. You can pack your things now or tomorrow, but don't put on a show." Alexei flared up. "You think you're so smart? Do you understand what you're doing? You're ruining everything." Katya calmly nodded. "Yes, I'm ruining what you built on lies." He stepped closer. His voice deepened. "Katya, don't be a fool. You can't manage this alone. You without me?" Sveta, who had been sitting in the next room and heard the conversation, emerged and calmly stated, "Good evening. Katya can manage perfectly well, and if you attempt to exert pressure, we have grounds to contact the relevant authorities." Alexei turned sharply, saw Sveta, and seemed to realize for the first time that Katya wasn't alone. His gaze darted around the room. He understood that everything here was prepared, that Katya wasn't hysterical, crying, or weak. She was in a state of calm determination, and for people like him, that was the worst possible outcome. "I knew it," Alexei hissed. "You've ruined everything. You don't even realize how lucky you are to have me." Katya replied quietly, "I'm not lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have seen you in time." He started to leave, but he stopped at the door. "You'll regret this." Katya didn't flinch. "No, I'll only regret one thing, believing you sooner." Alexei slammed the door, and the silence returned, no longer frightening, but ordinary. The first few days after he left were strange. Everything seemed right, yet a void remained within her. Katya found herself waiting for his usual call. "How are you?" Then she would remember, and anger would rise within her, not at him even, but at herself. How could I have missed it? But Sveta said, "Katya, people like that deliberately make it so you don't notice. Don't blame yourself. What matters is that you got out." Then Alexei's attempts to regain control began. He sent messages, sometimes affectionate, sometimes angry, sometimes accusatory. Then, a phone call came from his mother. Her voice was as sharp as a knife. "What do you think you're doing? You ruined the wedding, disgraced the family. Do you think you'll get away with this?" Katya listened calmly and replied, "I am not obligated to uphold your family's reputation at the expense of my own life." "What life?" the woman shrieked. "You're making a scene." Katya didn't argue. She said tersely, "Don't call me again," and blocked the number. The matters with the restaurant, the officiant, and the money were gradually resolved, but something else was far more important. For the first time in a long while, Katya felt she wasn't trapped, that she had a choice, not to endure for the sake of family, not to stay silent to avoid a scandal, but to calmly walk away when things felt dangerous. A month later, Katya happened to encounter that waitress, Olga, at a nearby grocery store. Olga seemed flustered, intending to pass by, but Katya stopped her. "Olga," Katya said. The young woman nodded. "How are you?" "I'm fine," Olga replied softly. "Afterward." "I was afraid you'd hate me, that I interfered." Katya smiled. "I'm grateful to you, and I want you to know that. Sometimes, one honest act can change someone's destiny." Olga lowered her eyes. I used to stay silent too, and then I regretted it. But this time, I couldn't." Katya nodded, and they parted ways like two ordinary women in an ordinary city. Only both knew that this time, silence hadn't won. Several more months passed. Katya was living a quiet life again, working, visiting her mother on weekends, and taking evening walks. And sometimes, when the street was particularly peaceful, she'd catch herself thinking, it could have been so different. There could have been the wedding, the photos, the guests, the congratulations, and then the paperwork, the loans, the pressure. And one day, I would have woken up and realized I didn't understand where my life had gone. But that didn't happen, because a week before the wedding, an unknown waitress at the restaurant hadn't looked away from someone else's misfortune. And because Katya, a grown woman, hadn't brushed it off, hadn't said it was nothing, hadn't proceeded as if nothing had happened, but had paused and listened. After all, life is often saved by quiet victories and unglamorous moments, and by 5 minutes of stillness behind a screen when you hear the truth and choose yourself. And Katya chose calmly, at the right time, and forever. M.